thank you all for being with us tonight. My name is Farrah Lewis, and I will be serving as moderator tonight for this important discussion. On behalf of the Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Program, Family and Community Resources, and in partnership with New Life Community Center and Plymouth County District Attorney's Office, I want to welcome you to the Fighting the Invisible Battle, Exposing Labor Trafficking panel. Labor trafficking doesn't always make the headlines, but it exists in the shadows of our community, impacting real people, real families, and real futures. You'll be hearing from some truly incredible panelists who bring professional insight as well as real-world experience and heart to this work. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. Tonight we welcome you, welcome your curiosity, your empathy, and your question. Thanks again for showing up and for choosing to be a part of the solution. Let's get started. Panelists, I'll hand it over to you.
Please start.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Burton. I'm from the Weed Hour Division of the U.S. Department of Labor. Thanks for having us here tonight. My position is currently, I used to be a wage hour investigator doing investigations in the Boston area. And my position now the last 2 years is my title is regional coordinator, but I'm tasked with the UNT visa program, certification program that the Department of Labor we issue certifications to support people who are applying for UNT visas. And the T visa is for the victims of trafficking. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Oscar Lugano. I've been working in the field of human trafficking for the last since 2010. Sorry, I was 12. I was young back then. I have experience working with victims and survivors of sex and labor trafficking. Through all these years, I have used different hats. I have worked with building up safe homes for children, survivors of sex and labor trafficking in Mexico. I have experience doing outreach and training law enforcement in Brazil for the Olympic Games, in the US for Super Bowls, Houston, Minneapolis. I have been working here in New England area since 2017. Working in the city United States, building up partnerships and building up outreach. Right now, I work with company miners that are in this region. But tonight, I'm here doing different hats, but I'm here also representing the years of experience that I have with this field. I just want to start saying thank you very much for being here. It's a warm day. I know many of you guys would like to be in the swimming pool or on the beach, but if you guys are here this evening, it's good. I'm very, very happy to share with you all. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Carlos Matos. I'm the District Director for the U.S. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division here in Boston. And I'm tasked to enforce critical labor laws in Massachusetts. One of the laws that we spend a lot of time in is the Fair Labor Standards Act, which entails making sure people get paid the proper wages, minimum wage, overtime, also making sure that they maintain payroll records, time records, and that they comply with child labor laws. So in the type of work we do, we visit work sites and talk to workers, talk to the employer, do site visits, and in that line of work is where we counter various labor violations. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question that we have here is directed towards all the families here. What exactly is labor trafficking, and what does it look like in your role?
So, as I mentioned, we enforce labor laws, wage and hour laws. So, when we go into a work site, we need access to workers, payroll records. And when we talk to workers, they provide a lot of details pertaining to the laws that we enforce. We don't investigate trafficking or prosecute trafficking, but in our line of work, workers will give detail. So detail could include wages being kept, uh, employees being restricted to a certain area, not having the freedom to go out, not having the passports. So when that comes to our attention, then we notify the authorities that will investigate trafficking.
Just before I answer that, I would like to ask, since we are not a big crowd, I would like to ask, how many of you guys are lawyers here? How many of you guys are with an agency here? A community agency, or what kind of agency? Okay, because I think that could change the answer, and that I think I won't tell you by law, because we have lawyers, we have the Department of Labor here. But one thing I can tell you about labor trafficking is that it's a form of human trafficking, of course. There's a lot of stereotypes on how does a human trafficking victim looks like. And I'm just saying that because we are talking here, I've seen a lot of community agencies. There's a lot of stereotypes of where they're coming from. And one thing I can say about labor trafficking is that many of us, especially with my experience doing outreach, we try to get into the law specific, oh, you're labor traffic or not. Sometimes I think we're wasting our time. I mean, I'm sorry. I think either it's not by law labor trafficking or not. In your work, in your outreach, when you're out there in the community with people, you might see situations where someone is being exploited, where someone is being definition like force, fraud, coercion, right? Like someone is being taken advantage of this labor using force, using fraud, using coercion. Sometimes it's hard, and that's why I'm very happy we have the experts here to find out this is labor trafficking or not. But one thing I would encourage community partners is that even if there's something that is telling you this is not right, keep asking, keep asking, and keep getting the experts, because it doesn't matter sometimes by definition, but we see a lot of things in the community. So I hope that makes sense for some of you guys.
Thank you. So I think what Oscar just mentioned is really important, that the labor trafficking is something that's very hard to see, and it's hard to understand, it's very nuanced. So I actually brought the definition of a severe form of trafficking in persons is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt, bondage, or slavery. And that comes from the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. The reason that we come into contact with it in the Department of Labor is that we, as Carlos said, we don't investigate trafficking, but in our civil enforcement, we come across it a lot of times. And a wage hour investigator might be the first person that a person who's been trafficked has the opportunity to speak to. And while Carlos and his team are looking into the wage violations or the child labor violations, if they detect that trafficking is happening, they then pass it along over to my group. And what we do is we try to connect that person with us, potentially services and advocacy groups that can help them. And if they are undocumented, we try to push them in the right direction of finding some type of representation to help them, with any status issues that may be preventing them from coming forward and reporting their trafficking and/or wage violations or child labor. So I think it's very important to know that wage hour is only one agency of Department of Labor, and we only come across it, trafficking, in our civil investigations. So it's kind of a roundabout way that we end up being put into an area that's a criminal, activity. But we do our best to help hook people up with the right resources to help them remedy the wage violations, and then also get the services that they need and any immigration support they might need.
Okay, so we're gonna get into kind of speaking about the differences between, victims and survivors. And so this is kind of a two-pronged question here. What are some similar vulnerabilities that victims and survivors have? And what makes it harder to identify or assist labor trafficking? So what are the vulnerabilities and what makes it hard to identify these survivors?
I'm just gonna chime in right immediately. I think first, one big vulnerability that everyone has is that they need to work. They have aspirations for their lifestyle. They need, I mean, they trust someone to offer them employment. The need of employment, you know? I think if all we are billionaires, I don't think we should be looking for jobs. But I think one big vulnerability that everyone has is that economic need. I need to work, I'm in debt, I have someone, and those vulnerabilities are not always present. For example, I know a case where this was a teacher, a dance teacher, and she was fine until her daughter got sick. Then she got a lot of medical bills. That need led her to be able to accept a job offer where she ended up being exploited in labor traffic. Not only labor traffic, also she was being sex trafficked, which is one other thing that I think is important to bring that. Sometimes when we talk about this, we just bring sex traffic this way and labor traffic that way, but sometimes it could cross over. Or sometimes we might have a family, a group of people where some of them could be experiencing labor and some of them could be experiencing sex trafficking. So I would say the need to work, economic vulnerability. I would also say that US born citizens also could be victims of labor trafficking. So a big vulnerability sometimes is not knowing your rights. And I would just add also the cultural aspect. Sometimes to make someone more vulnerable. For example, like there are some cultures and where you have more respect from different authorities, from elderly, from someone coming and offering a job, and you cannot complain because he's the elderly or he's the guru, like he's like the head, so you won't complain about that, and that will put you in a trafficking situation. So sometimes also when we talk about labor trafficking, we should talk about vulnerabilities, but as we are approaching communities, we have to understand that culturally also that creates some vulnerabilities. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's what I come across in my work is it's very hard for a lot of trafficking victims to kind of self-identify. They don't, often realize that they're victims of trafficking because so much of it is very subjective to their own experience and where they're coming from. There is a common misconception that trafficking requires, transportation or smuggling or some type of transit. It does not. And you can be free to come and go to work each day and you can still be considered a victim of trafficking. So, when, as Oscar said, people may have debts that they're required to pay off, and if they don't pay off the debt, something bad could happen. So that is compelling their labor. And when an employer takes advantage of that, we find ourselves perhaps in a situation where it's labor trafficking. The victim's, education level can have a big impact, but it's not a determining factor. We have people with very advanced degrees who can be labor trafficked and people who are coming from much more humble origins. We see a lot in our work, people who are immigrants who are on work visas that come either to do, seasonal work or farm labor, or sometimes even, the H-1B visas where they're in a situation where they do have that advanced degree and they're working in software or something like that. We also see a lot of people who are, of course, the people I work with are all undocumented, so I can only speak to the people who are not U.S. citizens who've been trafficked. But what we're, in all industries and across everything, home health care, nannies, teachers, housekeepers. There's a million industries where you're saying those restaurants are a big, that's a big generator. But it is very hard to identify, and you like I said, sometimes It doesn't have to be that someone's in this scenario where they're locked in a basement or something terrible like that, or the employer has kept their passport. They may be free to come and go, but their own vulnerabilities is what the employer may take advantage of and may make them think that they can't leave employment.
In our line of work, some of the vulnerabilities that we find is language, not knowing the language, right? That restricts them. Immigration status is another one, but we don't investigate that component either. We look at whether the employer is covered by the laws that we enforce. I think those two probably are the ones that we come across in our work.
Yeah. I just want to chime in because you said why is it so hard to identify them. I would just add also because, like, for example, and it's not that I'm comparing, but sex trafficking, the trafficker, he puts out there the victim, we need customers, we need, for labor, sometimes it's hard to access them. It's hard to access them. It's hard to, not of, and it comes my outreach experience. Not all of us are going to go right there into that blueberry field in the middle of nowhere, that potato field in the middle of nowhere, where sometimes that's where you will find them. Some of them, they are home in the day, and are you in your office at night, and you know who's the company or who comes and clean your office? No. So I think sometimes even access them is very difficult. That's an important thing. I think sometimes it's hard to identify them because also a lot of practices that happen in labor trafficking is that some of these victims, they are hired by third party like employers. So sometimes you can go check on one and you won't find them. So that's why also I just thinking about a labor trafficking survivor I work with, and I'm just very happy that we're having this event today at a church, because the only place where she outside home where she was being exploited, she was able to come and have some kind of community. It was church. So I think that's very important, and that's why I start saying I'm so happy that you are here today and not in the beach. But because I think access labor trafficking victims could be a challenge. If not impossible, but could be a challenge.
Thank you for that, Oscar. Say someone from the audience goes home tonight and they, learning from tonight's events, they realize they are in a labor trafficking scenario. What protections or services are in place for workers who report labor trafficking but are fearful of retaliation from their employers? What can they do to make sure that they don't get further punished for speaking out?
As I indicated, we try to assist workers who are in need, right? We, as an agency, federal agency, we work with organizations, stakeholders from the community, worker centers, legal aid groups. We have state partners, we have federal partners. So if we do find that there's an indication of trafficking, we do notify the authorities to investigate the trafficking with the details that we know. And from my experience, they do provide services to protect the victims. That's the level of interactions that we have with a lot of organizations. And ultimately, if we do see a victim, we'll try to protect them the best we can, the best way we can.
So the Department of Labor, we actually have a number of tools that we can use to support folks who are fearful of retaliation and not sure how to go forward. One that's, with a big caveat of we are the federal government and things are very much in flux right now. It has been an interesting time to work for the federal government. But what we can say is that generally, I feel like people might be curious about this, the Deferred Action for Labor Enforcement Program is, we can only speak for wage hour, has not changed currently. So, our website is still up, and that is a protection that can be offered to workers who are perhaps interested in a statement of interest or who are part of a worksite investigation and fearful to speak to the government or to speak about their experience. And that's just one of our tools. Another thing we have that's very big in all of the statutes, the laws that we enforce, is retaliation, anti-retaliation provisions. So, retaliation can take a lot of different forms. It can be when an employer threatens to fire somebody because they're speaking to the Department of Labor. It's basically whenever an employer would take an action against somebody that would prevent the person from engaging in protected activity. And protected activity means basically your right to speak with an investigator or to file a complaint or to ask questions of your employer like, hey, why don't I get overtime? Or hey, why is that 12-year-old up on a roof? These are things that people should be able to ask about without fear of termination or some type of other, thing happening to them. So, if a worker thinks they're experiencing retaliation, by all means, the wage hour division, we do have provisions in place to help them feel more comfortable talking with one of our investigators and talking about what's happening to them. And then the program that I work in directly, which would be the UNT Visa Certification Program. Just broadly, a U non-immigrant visa is for someone, it provides legal status to someone who's been the victim of certain qualifying criminal activities. And also they have information that could be helpful about that crime and that they are likely to be or could be helpful to the Department of Labor in covering one of those crimes. So this is a long list as well, but I'll just say what those the 8 crimes that the Department of Labor can certify for are involuntary servitude, peonage, trafficking, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, extortion, fraud in foreign labor contracting, and forced labor. And I'm happy to go into a little more detail about any of those, after, if the time presents. And then we have the T non-immigrant visa, which provides legal status to, certain victims of human trafficking who assist law enforcement authorities in the investigation or prosecution of the trafficking crime. So. All right.
Well, I'm just going to chime in really quick saying, first thing, from an outreach perspective, community oriented. One thing I've learned, even right now, these times we're living in, is that there are protections, there are services, but one thing I would always talk with someone that this is bad is that I cannot promise you a lot of things because I don't know, oh yeah, everything's gonna be all right. No, I think that's why it's important to educate ourselves, even when we're talking about like continuing presence, the visa, your visa, you don't have to be a lawyer to get to know different immigration relief options that they could have. So even if you're not an expert, you can always talk, give a little bit of hope, knowing that if you are a foreign national that has been trafficked here in the US, or even if you were trafficked outside the US but by a US citizen, US permanent resident, there might be immigration relief options for you, like the U visa, the T visa, and other ones. I think it's important to educate ourselves in these kind of protections. I think also it's important to keep building up community partnerships and being able to know where to refer them, like with local lawyers, local organizations that they might know more about these protections. But one thing I would use this is just the fear is real, because also a lot of sex trafficking, labor trafficking, the victim, it doesn't start trafficking here in the US, for example, for a foreign national. The trafficking starts in home country. And I have victims say yes, and even working, talking with law enforcement partners, they said, I can guarantee that I will protect you in my town, but I cannot guarantee I will protect you in China. I cannot guarantee I'll protect you in Central America. I cannot guarantee I can protect you in Mexico. So I think that's why it's also important to keep building up partnerships, relationships with consulates. This is like with other with offices overseas. And I think that's a real thing, you know, because sometimes we do our 9 to 5 work, but that people in fear, we have to be really respectful because that's real. That's a real thing, you know. So it's
Thanks, Oscar, for that breakdown. So the next question kind of aligns with the question I just asked you. Now we're going to ask about what resources. Last question was about protections. This question is about resources. What resources exist for survivors of labor trafficking once they've exited a trafficking situation? Are these resources consistent across the state? Say if the individual didn't want to press charges, they just want to kind of remove themselves from situations. What resources are available for that individual?
Well, I'm gonna chime in saying, how many of you guys have tried to get resources for someone working for it? The thing about resources is that there is never enough resources. We are in a field where we were in a low budget sometimes, right? I would say first, thinking about a friend, survivor of labor trafficking, there's not enough resources. I remember her helping other victims getting out of that trafficking situation and having them living in their house, you know? So I would say the best resource is the community resource. Churches could be a great resource. Sometimes the great thing about finding community resources is that we don't have to go through a little bit of bureaucracy, right? I would say the community. There are a few resources too that I know. One of them, for example, if you are an adult over 18, survivor victim of labor trafficking, and you have a T visa, U visa, continued presence, you can go with the Office of Trafficking Persons (OT), which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services, and they can give you something that is called the certification letter. This certification letter doesn't give you resources, but that allows you to receive resources from a local agency, as sometimes as if you would be a refugee. Some of the things I would say about this is that things are changing. Some things we don't know how long or how will be the effects of different bill laws that have been recently signed. But that would be one way. The Office of Trafficking Persons, they have at least that. If you are a child, a minor, you don't need to be having a U visa or T visa. You just can be referred, and then we'll give you something that is called eligibility letter, which also that can allow you to get some benefits from local benefits. But still, some things are changing day by day, week by week, month by month. But I would say, even though those are great, for me, I would say the number one resource would be the community. Always reach out to your community partners.
And a quick caveat on that, family community resources is one of the resources that you can reach out to if you have any concerns. Call me. And your seat, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a pen and paper, so if you have any questions, feel free to write these questions down in a little card that we have available for you. We will be collecting them towards the end. Oh, and as well as the chat box. So feel free to put in your questions in the chat, and we will be collecting the questions towards the end of the panel. So let's move on. Panelists, or Oscar, how long do labor trafficking cases typically take from intake to resolution? And what are some of the common delays in the process?
Well, I think in my experience, I think there's no standard time, you know? I think some case, I wish I could tell you in 1 week your life will be solved, but sometimes I've seen cases that take years. And so I cannot really provide a specific amount of time. One thing I would say that I've seen why these cases take that long, sometimes is because also, and here I am on behalf of these agencies working, sometimes they're understaffed. There's a lot of, I would say sometimes the agencies handling these cases, they might be they don't have enough staff and things take time. So really, And that's why I said, that's why we have to reach our community partners. Because let's say sometimes a case can take years, or even to get a work permit, for example. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but it could take more time now than it used to take before. What is going to do that person for like a year, even for months, So I think, again, you can see my background is outreach, community, even building up partnerships, because I always keep going, reach out to community partners. But I would say there's no time. I don't know if some of you guys, yeah?
I have some experience with some cases that we've developed that have gone to the Department of Justice, and it takes years. It takes a long time. The criminal investigations, which requires many times different agencies working together. We might encounter the trafficking component, but again, we don't investigate that part. We don't prosecute. We do civil law enforcement. So we leave it up to them, and it's up to them to run with it. But in general, they take a long time to develop.
So what I'm hearing is there are no quick fixes.
Correct.
Okay. Carlos or Heather, you might be able to answer this next question. How do different agencies work together when handling a labor trafficking case? Are there designated liaisons or task forces? Meaning, how can community-based organizations more effectively support these agencies? And non-government and government agencies, how do they work together?
Sure. So in Boston, we have a network of friends, organizations that come for assistance, stakeholders, like I said, community organizations, legal aid groups. We have a consulate office that also comes to us. They understand the role that we play in. State partners, federal partners. From my experience, normally a victim goes to an advocacy group, a community group, because they trust. They're part of the community, and they might speak their own language, might be from similar cultures. That's where they go, and then some of that information comes to us. If it pertains to wage-related issues, right? And what we do is we look at that component, but as Heather indicated, we do also do a lot of work with retaliation. So many times these vulnerable workers, their rights are violated. So when we talk and ask questions, we might encounter, especially when we talk about retaliation. If there's retaliation, we ask more detailed questions. And in that line of work, they might volunteer something that leads to trafficking. And in that case, then, once we have a sense that, look, we have a criminal matter here, not a civil one, which we look into, we will pass it on to Department of Justice, for example, and then they'll run with it.
So in my small piece of things where we do the certifications for the U or T visas, I thought I should also clarify the U and T visas are not something that the Department of Labor gives to anyone. It's in case there's any uncertainty about that, that's something immigration can give to a person. We provide a document that basically certifies that the person has been a victim of trafficking or one of those 8 crimes that I mentioned. But we don't have to have an investigation happening for the Department of Labor to certify that someone is a victim of trafficking or one of those 8 crimes. So when we uncover, on my side of it, the region that we represent, I work with a coworker, and we basically handle from Maine down to Virginia in the Caribbean. So when we uncover something in an advocacy group has connected a worker, let's say with an immigration attorney who now applies, and some people apply on their own without an immigration attorney. They apply to us for requesting certification review. I will usually interview that person. We try to document what their experience was. Our attorneys will, analyze whether it meets the legal threshold. But if we uncover something during that interview that nobody knows about and that is criminal and that is something we need to refer to a criminal agency, we will do that. But we always make sure that the victim is protected and on board with this plan, and that they have the supports in place that they need. So we do unfortunately come across a lot of very harrowing stories that we then work with other partner agencies to help the victim, to escalate it criminally if necessary, and also we connect people with the supports that they need. And as Carlos mentioned, that Wage Hour has a great network of advocacy groups that work regularly with us and that trust us and bring us good information that can support our investigations. And we have a position called the Community Outreach Resource something. Anyways, we have one person for each office who is really like the outward-facing person for each local office, and they work tirelessly to make sure that the community groups feel comfortable. We have a lot of workers who don't want to go into a federal building and talk to anybody, so we go out in the community and talk to them where they do feel more comfortable. So it's a rewarding job when you're able to connect somebody to the resources they need to, a new chapter in their lives and to move on. But I'm not sure if that answered the question.
My name.
Oh, no, I lost
That's
your name.
fine.
No, it does answer the question. It actually leads it perfectly to the next question, Heather. You said that you do conduct a lot of interviews, investigations as part of your job descriptions. But what measures are in place to prevent survivors from having to retell their stories multiple times to different agencies or different departments? Is there sort of a protocol in place that we're not re-traumatizing the survivors?
I can take that one. Started. Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of times it is unavoidable. By the time I come into the picture, the person has usually been connected already with an immigration attorney or an advocacy group, and they've often talked about the wage violations perhaps with the investigator, but they haven't talked about the fraud or coercion or the violence or the threats that have been made against them. So this is their first opportunity sometimes, or sometimes they have been with an advocacy group for quite a while who's supporting them, and they're getting treatment and therapy and support. When we do our interviews for URT visa certification, we let the victim know it's absolutely their time. They can take any amount of breaks that they want. I tell them this is not an investigation, it's not an interrogation, it's a conversation about what happened to you. And we really try to do a victim-centered approach to everything. We don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. It's very, for me, it's really rewarding work. It's very challenging sometimes. A lot of these folks have never had the space to reflect on what that situation made them feel like. So I do see a lot of tears and a lot of emotion. And I thank everyone at the end of my interviews for sharing their story and for trusting me to, parlay that information to our attorneys. Because and by speaking up, hopefully it doesn't happen to someone else. So the work that we do on the UNT visa side of things also helps to inform our investigators how to be more sensitive and how to identify trafficking when they're out in the field. If someone's being, unable to make eye contact, or someone looks really young, or someone doesn't know where their passport is, we work. Our investigators are the first people in the field who may come into, it's the first person that a lot of these people have spoken to from a government agency, and it's a really unique opportunity to try to prevent or help if something bad is happening. So, we try our best to be as sensitive to them, to not re-traumatize it, but they do have to tell us their stories, so.
I'm just gonna chime in here. I think that's just one part of for a survivor, the whole process that could take life. I would say each case is different. I don't like to put survivors just in one big tag because each case is different. I know survivors that part of their healing is tell their story, and they find purpose in doing that. I know other survivors that they just have to keep doing because that brings money, to be honest. And I think we must understand, like again, what the economic vulnerability. I think sometimes we should address that issue even with survivors. Because sometimes it's like, oh yeah, the survivor speaks, and that's what is bringing money. Why? Because that survivor has a criminal record, or because that survivor has these other different things that. So I think trying to break that economic vulnerability, that economic cycle, it's something that it helps to prevent for those survivors that they don't want to keep with their story, that they move on from that. Because sometimes I think that's an important thing. I think I would say that's a big thing for them, like how we have them to stop telling their story is just to create the systems in place that they could move on with their lives. Education, help them with their criminal records, help them with their immigration, help them with different things that if some of them help them with mental health, that's a big thing. We have the survivor who tells the story, and we have to understand trauma. And we're good, like, okay, sex trafficking, there's trauma, but there's also force, there's also coercion, there's also violence in labor trafficking. So being able to provide mental health and resources, I think that's very, very important. And I think those are some of the ideas that I have right now.
I'm going to preface this question. After this question, Marty will be collecting the questions. We'll be going around, so just letting you know, as well as the questions on Zoom as well. This is for anyone on the panel. You kind of touched on this a little bit, Oscar. What accountability measures are in place when agencies fall short in providing timely or trauma-informed responses to trafficking victims?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yes, so what accountability measures are in place when agencies fall short in providing timely or trauma-informed responses to trafficking victims? So basically, how do you hold yourself accountable as an agency when someone falls short in making sure that they're providing trauma-informed care or not re-traumatizing the victim?
I think that's a big thing because and I'm just gonna be honest, like in the field, the trauma-informed, that's why like we use the word a lot, victim center, which I love, it's real, but trauma-informed, but sometimes the most traumatic are those trauma-informed agencies. I would say creating policies that keep ourselves accountable. I would say bringing, as we mentioned before, bringing survivor, not just in the table, but giving a voice in the table. I think that's a very important thing. Being accountable with others internally in our agency, our organization, and bringing survivors experts and other experts in the area. That's something that will help us to be able to find that accountability, which sometimes you don't see in the field.
Yeah, I think at least for the UNT visa certification program, we're very proud of the work that we do. We do have limited resources, and we do the best we can. We are seeing a huge increase in volume. But we're really open to suggestions. We work very closely with I work directly with the workers. A lot of them will reach out to me directly. I work with their immigration council. I work with advocacy groups. So we're very open to suggestions about how we can, continuously improve our program and make it more efficient. Right now, it has been it has been challenging. The volume is way up. People are feeling very nervous. We also, another aspect of the work that I do that I didn't mention is we are a law enforcement agency that you can report trafficking to. So we do get a lot of people immigration advocates who report the trafficking to us without necessarily seeking a certification. So I guess that's another tool that I should have mentioned earlier. That is a faster way for people who are on the path to a T visa application with immigration without having to wait for the certification. So, but yeah, we're very open to suggestions about how to make things go better. This is a program that's adapted. It's relatively new. I think Wage Hour became a certifying agency, I shouldn't misspeak, but approximately in 2012. OSHA just became a certifying agency, so their program is in its infancy. But you know, we're always learning.
May I add something? Just all of a sudden the light went. Also, one very important thing to keep ourselves accountable, and it matters in this field, is wording. The words that we use. Make sure that you create policies that use the right wording. Because right now, some words put the blame on the victims. Some words that we use could, even though we don't know, could be traumatized, could be re-traumatizing. So one practical thing that I always suggest agencies, and that's why I think you should work with survivors, experts, is try to find in your protocols, try to find in everything, use the right word that provide dignity to the victim, to the survivor, and take away those words that might be used, but that words that put shame on the victim, or even like unconsciously like say, oh, you're guilty, you're a criminal. The wording is very important, and I would also say as your agency, how you communicate your cases, or the way you communicate out to the community also, that could change the perception that people have towards survivors. So wording, vocabulary, it's very, very important.
Thank you, Oscar. That actually gives us a perfect segue into the next question. You mentioned a lot to utilize survivor experts. So how are your agencies incorporating survivor feedback or lived experiences into your policies and practices?
Yeah, through our investigations, we learn. There are times where we've come across situations where an employer would hide the workers in a closet or a cooler. We learn from that. So when we go visit sites, we make sure we tour the work site and look at any place where workers might be in hiding. So I think we do incorporate some things that we learn from cases as we move forward. We're always learning, always within the law. We adhere to the policies and regulations of the department, but making sure that we apply our lessons so that we assist the workers.
I would say from different things I've seen with different agencies, sometimes even they're required that you have a survivor. And sometimes really, I think we just have to go further and not just bring survivors in the field, but give them a voice. I think there's also locally, New England, and also nationwide, there are survivor coalitions, survivor networks, that we should also go and partner with them and go and ask them. And I would say just like being out there and being able to build up those partnerships.
In my own work, I think every victim of trafficking that I interview, I learn something from, and I adapt my next interview to be more sensitive to what I learned from the previous one. And for sure there are cultural differences with people from certain parts of the world, and then you learn that, if I'm interviewing a victim from India, these are some of the questions and some of the pressures that they may be feeling that are unique to their culture. If I talk to somebody from Central America, I know how to phrase things a certain way because I've learned over time that I can get that information, get someone to tell me that information without making them uncomfortable if I say it in the right way. So it is a really, in that way, I guess I'm constantly in my own work trying to improve and make it more efficient and less traumatic for the person I'm interviewing. I like to be very, in touch with the advocates and the immigration attorneys that I work with, because I know that people's lives are on hold while they're waiting for our agency to process their paperwork. So, it's an open door policy. They can check in at any time, and I think try to be very responsive to that. I mean, there's nothing worse in the world, right, than feeling like you've been ghosted, and the government should not be ghosting you.
Right.
So you need to, we need to we all need to be accountable and respond to our constituents, so to speak.
I kind of want to end on a little lighter note, because this is a pretty heavy topic. What are some promising practices or solutions you've seen that help prevent labor trafficking before it begins? How do we better, as a community, support victims and survivors? So practices that work, and how do we support survivors?
Well, I would just say that, and I just remind my old days, prevention. Prevention. How I want that to stop, let's stop the things that create someone vulnerable. For example, people say in the field, oh, I care about trafficking, but I don't care about climate change and other things. But there are studies that when people in South America, Central America, there are studies showing that when we damage natural resources, that creates vulnerabilities. Because now that will create an economic problem. So I would say going back to the roots, it's an important thing, educating, but not just educating with information, but preventing. One example is just coming to my mind that I did before doing outreach. There was a community where people were being sex and they were trafficked because they didn't have water. And there was this big oil industry that they were taking the water from their community and using it for their factories. And that community had no water at all. So you could see child being trafficked, people being trafficked because of the economic problems that not having water create. So here we go doing prevention. We're coming here with all these different technology, virtual reality, telling stories, blah, blah, blah. But some of that people, they didn't need that. All they need was water filters. So we ended up getting water filters and bringing clean water to that community. It doesn't sound like the most anti-trafficking thing as people think, but I know that creates change. So I would say think outside the box and go to the roots. That would be an important thing.
I think this is an awesome question. So in my work, what I've seen that works and that helps people self-identify as trafficking victim and or prevent it. First of all, advocacy site visits, and I could just use a few examples. I had a case on a farm recently where the consulate in that state had showed up a few times, and then an advocacy group from that state showed up a few times. And on the third visit, the workers finally were like, oh, something's not right here. And, and then finally someone complained to wage hour. And, here a few years later, I'm helping these people, deal with their immigration issue and certify that they were victims of quite a few crimes. So, another thing I think that's been amazing, right, is the internet, because I interviewed a housekeeper the other day who was on an H-2B visa, and she told me the employer was making all sorts of threats. If you don't work today and work nonstop, and if you keep complaining, I'm going to make sure that immigration never issues you another H-2B visa ever again, and your record will be marred, and you're never coming back to the U.S. And that could permanently screw up somebody's future economically. And she did research, and she realized that the employer's not allowed to say that to you. The employer's not allowed to threaten you. They can't revoke your H-2B status. And, so she was able to educate herself. That was awesome. She went on and figured it out. Another thing that I've seen is employees shaming employers on like Facebook, community groups. I can think of a few cases where employees stood up to their employers who were not paying them, recorded it, and then posted on like Facebook, and people say, oh yeah, she didn't pay me either, don't go work for so-and-so, you're gonna get ripped off. So that's a wonderful way to prevent future victims of trafficking. And then, community supports are great. Even when somebody has escaped a trafficking situation, it may be they're going to church or some type of community center, and in talking to their community, they realize that they were a victim of trafficking, and so they educate the people around them, and they then advocate for themselves, and because a lot of the trafficking, right, it feeds on vulnerability and isolation, and a lot of the folks who fall victim to trafficking or who get themselves in these situations where you say, oh my God, it's brutal what's happened to them. It's because they're isolated and they're away from their home country. They're in a very vulnerable spot. So whenever they can get supports to feel more, it helps them move on, and it educates other people around them.
Thank you, Heather. That was really good.
Sorry, Fair.
Go ahead, Carlos. Go ahead.
I was thinking of one, as a promising practice. So we do investigations of wage theft, right? Wage and hour violations. But sometimes we kind of more egregious issues, labor related, maybe not to the level of trafficking, but labor exploitation. There have been times where the Department of Justice has extended their work to criminal side, right? So we do civil, we keep that lane civil, and they do criminal. And on the criminal side, they'll prosecute. And so there's a record of us doing work. There's a record of Department of Justice doing their work. And when people put things together, they especially stakeholders come to us and say, that was magnificent how this was able to work out, because now employers are paying attention to this. And it was a press release that came out. So that type of notice to the regulated community made a difference to both worker centers. My neighbors would ask, is this something related to you? But it was just great to see the justice took place because of our work and of another agency doing their work.
So what I'm hearing is, all in all, the best way to prevent labor trafficking is education. Okay. So we are going to move on to audience questions.
I would just add education, but also breaking the economic vulnerability, because it can be all
Yes.
kids. If I don't have food,
Yeah.
so I would say education is a big component, but also economic.
That's a big one.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Severe. What makes someone a victim/survivor of labor trafficking? So basically, they're looking for the simple definition of it.
I don't feel that comfortable answering this because I would like to respect all the survivors, and I know some of them, there are different names or there are different things. One thing, basic thing, but again, respecting which one is at, is when they are out of that trafficking situation. It's a healing process. I think before you would say, when you survive, you went through a healing process, now you are out of that situation and you have walked out of that situation. But I know that in the field there's wording, vocabulary is tricky often. As I said, we always have to find the right wording. And I know some survivors also, they decide to use some different words. But I would say a key thing for someone that is victim is where I would say also survivor is when some sort of you walk away from that situation and some sort of justice has been brought. Not necessarily needs to be brought justice to criminal, but also justice to yourself and with your own healing process. But I know if someone also has more to add, and we're always open to keep learning from all of you guys.
Next question. This is the one. Is there data on the number of people that are forced into trafficking through abduction as opposed to third parties such as online chatting, friends, etc.?
I haven't encountered a certain figure, but I have come across situations where someone is lured through social media. They've brought workers over, enticing them with opportunity from another country, and then they're restricted, and we learn about that. So just by the mere fact that we're encountering those issues at our level for wage and hour violations tell me that the numbers are probably great in those two examples.
I would say in my experience, and I used to joke about this, I don't do that anymore out of respect. I used to say I've never crossed a lot of cases of abduction. Then I get to hear a few people's cases, and now I would say 97% of the cases that I've worked through, I've seen through, it's not about someone abducting you, taking you out, and putting you on the white van. It's more about someone building trust with you, with your family, praying on your needs. Not just when you're here in the US, it starts at your community. Sometimes it's someone from your family, it's a neighbor that comes to your town, and it seems he did the American dream or she, comes with money, shows I have a work opportunity, you can come. So I would say a lot of times it's about trust. It's about someone coming, bringing that job offer, and I would say that's the number one thing I always see. Someone getting your trust. Once they have your trust as everything, then isolating you. I hear that word before, and that's a big thing. Isolating you, and that's a big thing.
Yeah, I'll just jump on that. The definition of severe form of trafficking in persons has those words, right? Force, fraud, and coercion. And to me, I don't know the numbers. Honestly, I don't know that we could ever uncover them. Because what is coercive to me could be, not coercive to somebody else. So it's all about the individual's particular vulnerabilities that make them, they get people in the situations that they find themselves in. And I'm trying not to say that in an insensitive way. I'm curious also the difference between victim and survivor. I guess you're on the other side of it, but I think it's a great conversation.
Bloomberg is reporting Dale has been quietly terminated. Are you still seeing movement in Dale requests?
This is where I have to stick to the talking points. We know there's a lot of uncertainty about Dale, deferred action for labor enforcement. We can only speak to wage hour, and it is currently our website. As of today, we're still in operation. We submit, if someone is interested in submitting for a statement of interest letter, they can do so. And it is, there's a four national office who reviews those cases.
Real quick, Heather, you brought up real quick, I wonder if Carlos or Oscar can answer that question, the difference between a victim and a survivor. How do you differentiate those two?
I'll leave it up to Oscar because he has more experience in that topic.
Again, I think when you're making is when you're in that situation. But again, I don't like. I just have so much respect for my survivor friends that I don't want to. Oh yeah, you're survivor. But I think survivor is when you're out of that situation, but not just only physically, because there's some people that and understanding that trafficking comes with a lot of trauma. I would say once you are in a situation where you are out of that situation, not just physically, but also with your mind, your body, your spirit, when you are able to move on from that situation. I would say, and what I said about victims, I would say the trafficking, the exploitation, the abuse, all these things are actively happening. Some people, they were victims of human trafficking. They walk out of that situation, but I don't think at some point they didn't realize they were victims. So when they realized they were trafficked, all that, I cannot say, oh, you will just survive this, because there was still a healing process for them. So even if there were years later, it's like, oh, that's my story. Then boom, and they have to go through that. But again, that's what I would use to differentiate more, but still I'm open to learning. And again, in the survival world, in this trafficking survival, words change oftentimes. And I think sometimes there's different words that now some survivors, some people with lived experience are using. And also I would like to learn, and I'm gonna ask, and then I'll send you an email. I was like, hey, well, in your experience, But I would say the thing is, like, you're not a victim right now. Like, you went to walk out of that situation, but also you went through a healing process.
Next question from the audience. What information, case sharing, policies, or the memorandum of understanding does your agency have with ICE? And what communications, if any, do you have with ICE?
I'm sorry. I know you guys won't invite me again, but I was just thinking about a friend told me once.
Yeah.
And then she said, I survive every day. Because also we think survivor, like we think about like a line, and it's not like the Boston Marathon. Like, oh, now I'm a survivor. Boom. Oh, I feel. I think there are good and bad days, and you become a survivor every day. So I just want to that just jumped on me that don't think it's like a line where this is the reach, because you can be here, but then the trauma, different things, you survive every day. So yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good. That was good. So I can repeat the previous question. What information / case sharing, policies, memorandum of understanding does your agencies have with ICE? And what communications, if any, do you share with ICE?
We don't have any sharing. There's no directive to tell us we have to share anything. But we have laws to enforce. They're very clear. It's been around for many years. But no, we don't share information.
Absolutely. What are the best ways we as service providers support, especially undocumented victims and survivors in today's political climate?
One I would say is empathy. Empathy. Of course, there are more practical ways, and I'm just trying to find the words because it's so hard. The fear, the stress that I would say in these times more people need mental health services to cope with the trauma, to cope with the stigma, to cope with a lot of things that they are going on every day. I think that's a big thing we can help them. Other big thing we can help them is with, which there is enough, legal. One of the things people getting into the system is you need a lawyer. You need a lawyer. So legal is a big need that people have. Legal advice. And the other one, I would say, it's always understanding, and as we were talking about survivor reform, trauma reform, I would always keep adding cultural reform. I think language access is a big thing. Understanding what I always use the example that how we access people and how we understand people is through language. And language goes beyond just wording, talks about culture, talks about history. There are some people that you might give them something in Spanish and you don't know that their first language is an indigenous language, different ones, Maya. So I would say mental health, I would say legal, it's a big thing. We can support our communities, And the other one is just to show that we are there, that we care. That I cannot solve your problems, but I'm here with you. That's an important thing that I have seen.
Just to touch on what Oscar said, it's true. Language access is very important, right? A lot of the vulnerable workers speak other languages. So but we at Wage and Hour we have investigators who speak Portuguese, Cape Verdean Creole, French, Russian, Khmer, and that to folks in Chinese, that allows us to communicate and have the trust. Mental health, absolutely. I think we're not in that area, but we see it. We do investigation of where there's child labor involved, and those are vulnerable. And there are centers in the area that provide mental health. It's limited, but it's nice that it's recognized and provided to those who need it. And legal assistance, there's a lot of advocacy groups who provide wonderful legal assistance to workers. You just have to ask, find around, but there are some really good organizations in the area that provide legal assistance.
Just speaking from a very practical perspective, I think one of the best ways that we show support is to make workers feel comfortable. We can interview them or work with them wherever they feel comfortable. So, I do a lot of, and I recognize the population that I work with doesn't have time to take a whole day off from work, can't afford to take a whole day off of work to go to an attorney's office to do an interview. So, I have interviewed guys who are at construction sites working or on their lunch break, whenever we can squeeze it in. They take a break, they go out to their car. I do it on WhatsApp. Their attorney if they have an attorney, their attorney will be on their own cell phone. We come to them and how they're most comfortable. It's not necessarily go to a federal building. And the Wage Hour Division always tries to go where the workers are at. But on the UT visa certification side of things, we also, we can do the interview from your home. I've had workers recently not feel comfortable even going to their attorney's offices. So, I'm very sensitive to making them feel comfortable and just be in whatever setting is going to help them, tell their story.
I just want to jump in and say that's a great thing. I'm so happy to hear that from you because you're totally right about, I always think, I don't know why, even those concrete blocks that they use in school and federal, they use everywhere. And I can tell you, that wall, is right there actually, but this is more like a church, I didn't see but that could trigger someone. You might be the Department of Labor or something, but you get your badge, you put it here, it doesn't matter. For some people, that will be oh, this is immigration. Mm-hmm. So even just these small things make a huge difference. So thank you very much.
Oh yeah, and sorry, internationally too. What's the beauty of WhatsApp is, a lot of the workers I interview are back in their home countries, so it's, WhatsApp is a wonderful thing.
WhatsApp, right? Yeah. I love WhatsApp. Sorry.
I think this question is asking about trainings. Are there trainings available for building awareness and how to help the victim, especially around approaching and de-escalation?
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So what trainings are available for building awareness and help, essentially assisting the victim? Trainings available for professionals, right?
Or even as a church, as a ministry, right? We come in and encounter where we have to meet people. Come in, sometimes we never seen before.
Right.
So I think it's important that we have awareness of signs and symptoms, so that we're at church. That's what we need help, right?
As Heather indicated, we have a community and outreach specialist, someone who goes to the community and talk about the laws that we enforce. And the person, for example, if this church needed some presentation on what we do or how we talk to workers or the various laws that we enforce, the person would be happy to come and provide that. And if it touches on retaliation, right? Because in retaliation is where we ask a lot of detailed questions that lead to labor exploitation, trafficking. That can also be part of the training. So that's something that we provide. Again, I have to repeat, we don't investigate or prosecute, but within labor, there's a lot of violations.
I would say, I mean, I have experience working with a lot of churches, training churches, and of course there are curriculums specific for church that use like the church wording and different things that could be beneficial from church, and some things that churches sometimes they do that I'm like, no. so that's a specific niche. There's of course partners, there's curriculums. I mean, I can think about and we can connect. Also, that's why we are here today, because of this connection. That's why there's the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office Task Force, because they are bringing everyone in Plymouth County together, which I think that's a great thing. About escalation, I think that's why you have to be trained. Even for outreach, you just don't jump right immediately. You have to train, you have to set up different rules, because sometimes trying to help we can harm. And my number one rule, even is like we're not Superman. Even though right now, like, you know. So there's a specific trainings of that. And most of the time, even when we talk about survivors or things like that, don't think like, it's not that we're gonna, I mean, there's situations, but just approach someone as you would like to be approached. All we are people, you know? One of the things I always, for example, in these kind of trainings, one of the things I teach that I learned is that like, don't be weird. And that's what I tell people, that's one chapter of not being weird. You're just meeting someone else just like you. And sometimes what the best thing you can do is just be yourself. And one thing that always helped, for example, when we used to do outreach, they told us just bring a cup of coffee. And that's all. That can change everything, you know? Good food. Cultural. If you're Mexican, don't bring me a burger. Bring me tacos, right? Tacos. If you have like different things, but I think there's a specific training with that. And I appreciate it because I can see you are like thinking, oh, what can I do? That's great.
And I can also answer to that question a little bit. FCR, the TAP program, we offer trainings. Laurie and I, with the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office. So feel free to reach out to us. We can definitely help you provide trainings to your constituents, members, whatever. Congregation, yes. So now we're going to go into the questions from our Zoom. We have about 15 members on Zoom.
We actually have
25 members on Zoom.
today.
So, what are early signs of labor trafficking?
From my experience, there's often, I think Oscar mentioned it before, a trust that is kind of abused, and then there a feeling that things are out of control, or there's an initial investment of money, there's some type of situation that makes it then hard to get out of. So people get into a very vulnerable position where they've already invested some amount of money in obtaining a visa, or I have to, I'm going to own part of this business if I invest a certain amount of my money. And before they know it, they've been working for 3 years for free, under threat of having immigration fault. So, I think situations that can initially seem pretty innocuous can lead to desperate situation. And again, as I said before, it's the person's individual vulnerabilities that makes them susceptible to that. So, an employer knowing that you have a big debt in your home country is not a good thing. So, but people know, there are employers out there who like to get the recently arrived, because they're very willing to work, and they have a financial, burden hanging on them. So, I think whenever you hear about some type of situation like that, someone might, that's one thing that comes to mind anyways.
I would just say it's important to get to know the signs, but also we don't have to generalize, because some of these signs could be or not. Just one example, for example, we always talk about if someone get your passport and your things. and my wife isn't soon, and if she is, hopefully she doesn't see that. But like sometimes she when we travel, guess who take the passport? Me, because I want to make sure that passport doesn't get lost. And sometimes we treat people like, oh, you go to the airport and someone has your documents, your passport. So here I am, like sometimes I go to the airport and here Latino guy holding this passport of the whole thing. And sometimes some people go, oh. So I would say there's some signs, but doesn't mean that happens. For example, for some children, they could be trafficked and they could be going to school, but for some reason they don't go to school, they're sleeping in school. When you talk to them, you realize that they are working. Not every child that sleeps at school is trafficked. If not, I was trafficked all my life, from my childhood. Other early signs, we talk about isolation. When someone cannot leave the workplace, that person lives there. The employer is also the landlord. Those are kind of things that doesn't necessarily says, oh, you're being labored, but at least it's like paying more attention to that kind of things. I would say work injuries. That sometimes that's a big thing. There's some trainings for EMS, different help, and sometimes there's some work injuries that could be a sign that there might be some potential trafficking too. I would think about those ones, but still, I would say just because someone have a work injury, oh, there's trafficking there, you know.
This is a good one. What does meaningful justice look like?
I think minimal justice is justice, right? So we control over the laws that we enforce, but there, within our line of work, we might see other, and that's why we have relationship with state partners, federal partners who enforce other laws. And we'd like to see them enforce those laws, so justice.
Oof. I won't sleep tonight. I don't know who made that question, but that's a really deep question that I will just like, oh, it's so profound. Like, wow.
Yeah, it is.
I would say justice has different components. I can just speak from my experience, from what I feel. I would think justice has one part of the healing process, but also held accountable. Held the traffickers, held the abusers accountable, and have them pay for what they did. That's a big thing. I think sometimes we can, some people that they experience trafficking, they could get out of that situation, go to school, and do all these other things, but that trafficker never was held accountable. And some sort of, I don't know if I've answered that, but I think there should be more enforcement, and we should have accountable the traffickers.
You said it well. Yeah. If someone in this room is being trafficked, how would we know? Exactly. You wouldn't.
You could just say it into the mic so we can capture it for our audience.
Just write a paper. No, I don't know, because that's the thing, you know, like we all could be trafficked, like, because it's
Yeah.
hard. Fine.
And what financial supports exist for victim/survivor? Say they have been, trafficked, they owe money, they can't pay bills. Are there any financial resources available to them?
Well, I mentioned before that might not be the solution, but for some children and for some adults that have experienced trafficking, they can get like a certification letter from the Office of Trafficking Person that would allow them to receive benefits as a refugee. Some of these benefits could be, for example, cash assistance or other different benefits. But again, I hear before someone here in the panel saying we're going day by day, and some of these things might change or not. I don't really just say, oh yes, you can get this, because some things have changed, and some things that we still don't know how will be the effect. But I would say there are some of them that they could access.
If wage hours is successful in their investigation, we get back wages.
Great.
And I just want to plug in real quick, back to the TAP program, FCR. We do have the HUD system, which is a housing and urban development program. It is on pause right now, but we do have programs available, such as RAPT, for people who need help pay first class and security for housing. So there are a few resources available through the TAP program, which FCR runs. Nancy as well. And Health Americas is here, Health Americas as well. So this is a final question, kind of to sum everything together from the audience. What systems allow trafficking to occur right under our noses? We did touch up on that a little bit, but if you could just circle back for the audience.
So once we initiate an investigation, we ask questions, right? And if we gather information from a particular worker who has been trafficked or shows signs, then we'll take it to the agencies that investigate and prosecute. Not having access, I think, is the issue. So if we don't have all the resources to look at all employers, all cases. With that said, it's just having access to the workers.
I would say there are different layers that this could be answered. So in one layer, I think sometimes, again, this is my own opinion, I think there are systems in place that historically the root, they create vulnerabilities for those who are already vulnerable. That's why before we talk about change your policies, have survivor input, to change systematic, to create systematic changes. So that's one layer. I think there are some systems in place that doesn't keep that made for some people to come out of their trafficking situation more hard and put them more at risk. And that's why I believe in that if we're gonna create change, we have to create change from different battlegrounds. One of them is policy. And I think that's a big thing, that some people are doing a great job from all the way up changing policies. On the other side, from our community, I would say a lot of things that we've seen is a lot of not empathy, a lot of I would say sometimes indifference, because it's not effectiveness. That's one of the biggest things. And also a lot of bias and a lot of judgment. One of the things that we said, oh, you get trafficked because you're crazy, because you're greedy, and see what happened, but we don't understand really. So I would say, from a community perspective, sometimes it's just indifference.
And this last question is directly from the pastor, but I'm going to answer this question. If someone is in a human trafficking situation in my church, who should I call? Call me. Call Family and Community Resources. Call the TAP program. We have a list of resources at that table. Please go through the list of resources. Let us know. Just go through it and call TAP. We provide resources to the entire Plymouth County. So call TAP. Call Family and Community Resources. All right. Without any further ado, if anyone has any further questions, any other things to add from panelists? I think that concludes our panel. Thank you everyone for coming. Oh, go ahead.
It seems like a lot of the victims or survivors are immigrants. But today's world, children, teenagers who are desperate for jobs, and because of social media, how are you able to recognize it as well? How do we educate our children?
So our question is, how do we educate our children? Children are also affected by trafficking, human trafficking, labor trafficking. What resources are available for children? How do we educate the youth?
Talk to you. Just
Okay.
kidding. Just don't give any kind of resources.
Yes.
No, but go ahead.
Yes, go ahead,
Oh,
Carlos.
no, well, for Wage and Hour Department of Labor, we do have a outreach specialist who will go out to schools. There are events where minors learn about their rights, and his name is Tom. He will provide information to that effect. If there were indications of trafficking mentioned, then of course we would put them to the right authority. They would investigate and prosecute. But if it's labor related, I think a good start would be with our office.
And I would just add, like, for social media, it's a big way where children like have been exposed to not just sex trafficking, labor trafficking, but these other kind of things. But I would say when we talk about children and labor trafficking, we should understand more a little bit the context of what they are coming from, especially for foreign nationals. There's a lot of cultural components. Some of them have a debt and they have to pay. Some of them, and that's also one thing. Oh, why did you walk out from that boss? Like, or why did you get out? But that few money is like when you go back and you see where some of these people are coming from, and that money buys medicine for someone with that remote village. So I would say sometimes it's to understand, and that's why I think a great way is not just come and give a talk, but build up relationships with your youth, in your youth group, in your church. Get to know the people, get to know the person, and build up that trust. That's what traffickers do. They build up that trust. They know more than anyone what do you need. They get to know you. So that's why I think sometimes it's great and good for come, give a presentation, blah blah. That's great. But also, as if you're in a role in your church or in your community where you can have further and develop that relationship with the children, that's great because you will build up trust and that will open ways that you can find how to do it better. I'm sorry.
I think that's a great question. As I mentioned, in my work, I only work with immigrants on the trafficking side, but I have come across, U.S. citizens who've been trafficked. And what we've done in those cases is refer them to the Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit and or the FBI, the Department of Justice. And that's, if they want to pursue something criminally, if they have a wage violation that's connected with the labor trafficking, that's where, Carlos and the local district office come in and can try to get some back wages or penalties against the employer if it's a child labor situation. And child labor is something we do see a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of trafficking of children and often by family members. So it's a really complex issue. The Department of Labor is, we're reluctant to investigate families. So, but there are situations, we have certain criteria about the thresholds of the types of businesses that we can investigate. But we definitely refer to other agencies that may be able to look into those issues. So I think it's a great question.
I can also add a little bit to that question as well. If you have any concerns for a youth under 18 of labor trafficking or even sex trafficking, it's important that you file a 51A with DCF and contact the Child Advocacy Center of Plymouth County if you're living in Brockton or wherever county you're coming from, the Child Advocacy Center. If you have any concerns about anybody under 18. Any other questions?
I have a question. I know you guys mentioned that this process is a very long process, and you guys also said that victims could also get that letter that will help you get government assistance, but in all reality, we know that's not enough for them to get by. I was just wondering, especially for undocumented, what else is there? Because I do work with victims. I'm a domestic violence and sexual assault advocate, and like before, I used to tell my clients that they did the hardest part, which is disclosing the abuse, but I came to learn that that is not the hardest part. The hardest part is actually going through it. And a lot of people, they don't disclose their abuse because the burden that comes with just going through it and like pausing your life, because your life pauses again. So is there any other extra assistance like from government agencies that helps? Because we all know cash benefits, DTA, it doesn't help, and especially if we're dealing with undocumented, now they're gonna go and work under the table and put themselves in worse predicaments. And if we wanna stop this, just like you said, we need to like target the roots and do prevention. And I don't know if it's a question or a suggestion, but if we have money coming within or like a program that victims can go into to guide them. Because sometimes just helping them during and not the afterlife, we didn't do much. We just helped for the moment. So I was wondering if there's anything for the aftermath. Okay, maybe we should all collectively like create something.
Yeah, again, not from government, but like from different non-profits, and that's why I keep always doing in the community, because that's what you're saying. Like, I like when you said your life pause. You know, when you see your case to 10 years, your life pause, and you cannot work, and that's why we have to reach out to churches, community, because they will be your resource. There's a few programs, not in Massachusetts, but I hear about some of them. Which, for example, there was a program that in LA that help survivors, victims of human trafficking, and also people to get like there was this chef, and they teach them. There was a program to training on how to become like chefs, and they support them at the beginning to find a job in the kitchen if that was their passion, or also start their own business. I think that's where I think we should have more business here, city people, business, and people, because also job training and job opportunities is huge. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't answer because, but I think we all should get more together and address that part, which you are right.
We have a question.
Yeah, I
Yes.
don't know if I'm missing out. Is there a 1-800 number? Is there a 24-hour number of something like that?
We do. So, family community resources, we do have our hotline. Like I said, all of our resources are located on that table. And there is also a human trafficking hotline, 888-373-7888. Yeah, 888-373-7888. Right?
Those are great numbers.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there are resources, there are hotlines, yes. Any other questions? All right, I think we can close it now. Thank you everyone for supporting and for showing up. We do have refreshers and snacks. Please partake in some of the sandwiches before you head out. And thank you for coming, and thank you panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.